In this, the first episode of Unpopular Opinion, I'll be discussing why I believe Dragon Ball GT is better than Dragon Ball Super. I'm not necessarily going to be comparing the shows directly the way I would compare, for example, Full Metal Alchemist to Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, because not only are GT and Super two different takes on the same time frame, but they are both sequels to a beloved, long-running franchise. So while I do believe GT is just a flat-out better show than Super, that's not necessarily what I'm going to be talking about. I'll be talking about why GT is a better continuation of the Dragon Ball series than Super. To evaluate a sequel's success as a continuation, we must first determine what that sequel ought to do. To determine what a sequel ought to do, we must analyze the stories that precede it. So I will briefly discuss Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. I want to briefly describe how the story evolved over time and where it left off. By analyzing where the story started and where it's headed, we can work out where it should go. Then I will explain why GT was better at capturing this than Super. The original Dragon Ball series was all about adventure. The series began following Goku and Bulma from place to place, looking for the Dragon Balls and meeting a huge cast of crazy new characters. Along the way, each villain has some unique power our heroes must learn to overcome. Eventually, many of the main villains end up becoming friends of our main cast. In a way, Krillin was originally an antagonist, the Ox King and Chi-Chi were antagonists, Yamcha, Puar, Tien, Chaozu, Piccolo, Android 8, etc. Throughout the series, Goku learns to overcome each of these characters, and eventually his friendliness, childlike attitude, and pure heart result in him making friends in the oddest of ways. Dragon Ball is first and foremost about adventure and about friendship. Dragon Ball Z was focused on adventure until the Frieza saga. The Saiyan saga built an insane amount of lore. We learn that Goku is actually an alien who was sent here from outer space to destroy the planet, and that his own race is coming to finish the job. Goku gives up his life to save his friends and family. Then we're introduced to a whole new aspect of the Dragon Ball world, the afterlife, King Yama, the Snake Road, Hell, etc. Eventually, Vegeta and Nappa show up, and they are the largest threat the planet has ever seen. These are the first characters that truly want to destroy the entire planet. Every other threat up until this point, with the exception of King Piccolo, merely wanted to rule over the Earth and/or accomplish some other smaller goal. This is where we see the first major tone shift in the Dragon Ball series. The stakes are significantly raised and everything becomes a lot more serious. While there are certainly still jokes, there are significantly fewer during this portion of the Saiyan saga. The Vegeta saga, if you will. I mean, Goku is pretty much gone the entire time, leaving the Z fighters to fend for themselves. Everything is pretty much hopeless. I should also mention that this is the last time that the Z fighters are relevant, but we'll get to that later. Eventually, just in the nick of time, Goku shows up and saves the day. Many Z fighters have already died to protect the planet. Then we learn that the only way to bring them back is with the Namekian Dragon Balls. Cue the Namek saga. I would argue that the Namek saga and the Captain Ginyu saga are tonally consistent with the series' direction thus far. However, once we get into the Frieza saga, that changes. Don't get me wrong, I love the Frieza saga. It's one of my favorite portions of the entire series, but it sets a lot of really bad precedents. During the Frieza saga, things get super serious again. Once the Ginyu Force is out of the picture, there are very few jokes, which is fine. Frieza is absolutely ruthless. It's not a time for joking around. But right around the time that the anime caught up to the manga, we started getting a ridiculous amount of filler. This set the precedent for all kinds of stupid Bulma side adventures on Namek, and worst of all, fights that lasted like 20 episodes. It also set a precedent for one of the coolest and worst things in Dragon Ball, the transformation. Don't get me wrong, the Super Saiyan is one of the coolest things of all time. The backstory and lore for the legendary Super Saiyan was amazing. Seeing Goku become the legendary Super Saiyan for the first time was spectacular. But Frieza transforming 4 times? That's just unnecessary. This set the precedence for power creep. Anytime they needed a new bad guy, they just made him bigger and stronger and gave him like 3 transformations. Anytime the heroes needed to beat somebody, they just said, "Strategies for losers. I'm just gonna become a Super Saiyan 13. This is when the show took a huge turn from being about adventure and friendship to being about action and action. This isn't inherently bad. I like that DBZ has a different tone than Dragon Ball. It shows that the series and the characters are progressing and growing. But the power creep eventually gets so bad that every fight is just, who can make a massive ki blast powerful enough to kill this guy? Tien? no. Yamcha, no. Piccolo, no. Just have Goku do it. Ultimately, the series culminated in the idea that our heroes would continue on, but they wouldn't always have Goku to just save the day every time anymore. But that's okay, because there don't appear to be any massive threats on the horizon, and many of our characters are continuing to train to fill that spot. Everyone goes on to progress naturally how they should. Those who want to fight, Vegeta, Trunks, Piccolo, etc., continue to train, while those who don't live a normal life, like Gohan and Videl. Then they give us this 10 years later crap, and right after he returns, Goku leaves his friends and family behind again to train Oob. What the hell, Goku? Regardless, I guess this stuff doesn't really matter because it's largely ignored by the sequels anyway. In the end, it feels like DBZ was supposed to be the end of Goku's story. Any continuation should have been focused on the Z Fighters and everybody's life without Goku. Both sequels kind of ignore this though, so instead of focusing on that, I've come up with a list of topics I think are important in discussing how well each series succeeds DBZ. This topic does lead right into my first topic though, so let's talk about continuation. Like I said, neither GT nor Super really continue the end of DBZ that well, but that's okay. I'm actually kind of a fan of how GT does it. When taken at face value, it seems like GT is largely disrupting the progression of the story, but on the contrary, it maintains the continuity fairly well by using the stupid little event in the first few episodes to take the story back to its roots while handing it off to a next generation. GT is like a love letter to Dragon Ball. It's basically Dragon Ball in space. When they reach season 2 and things become more serious again, it's almost like GT is recapturing that growth we saw from Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z in the compact frame of just 2 seasons and through different characters. GT gives fans of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z something to love without messing with the power creep too much. Super is almost like a parody of Dragon Ball Z in this regard. I'm actually a huge fan of Beerus and his backstory. The only problem is that Beerus' storyline pretty much exacerbates the whole power creep problem tenfold. Remember how Boo was supposed to be this ancient evil and the most powerful force the team has ever seen? Well, now Goku and Vegeta are fighting a literal god of destruction. I will say, I'm happy with Beerus and how he basically eventually becomes part of the Z crew, but he really makes it so that the rest of the Z crew will never have a chance at relevance again without a lot of shoehorning. While GT was better about adventure and passing the torch, Super has been about action, action, and action, as well as Goku carrying the torch forever. So now I briefly want to talk about focus. Super is entirely focused on making this the Goku and Vegeta show, fan servicing Toriyama's favorite characters into being the most powerful things in the universe. But only Goku's allowed to win fights because screw Vegeta. And as I've said previously, GT's focus is primarily on adventure. So now let's go to tone. Super's tone starts out very similar to Dragon Ball Z's tone, but it devolves into something really light and cheesy. It almost feels like generic assembly line cartoony anime to me. There's a distinct change in tone during the future Trunks arc though. The show becomes much darker and more serious. I like this tone shift, but I do wish it weren't so abrupt. As soon as the arc is over, it shifts right back and becomes too silly. GT's tone starts like DBZ's. For the most part, it is consistent with the end of Dragon Ball Z. Then it is immediately turned on its head, and the tone mimics that of Dragon Balls, as Goku, Pan, and Trunks scour the galaxy for the Black Star Dragon Balls. It takes the darker tone again once Baby shows up. Ultimately, I describe Super's tone as maybe silly, while I describe GT's as fun. Those are pretty similar, and that's a very fine line, but I think they both kind of slightly fall to one side or the other. So now I want to talk about power creep. When it comes to power creep, Dragon Ball Z is the champ, but Super is the master. First, we have a literal god of destruction. Then we have an angel that watches over him who can control time. Then we have Frieza with another power-up to Golden Frieza. Then we have a Supreme Kai from another universe whose future self steals Goku's body and then fuses with his past immortal self to become the ultimate immortal Goku plus Supreme Kai, Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Rose, BS, whatever. All the while, our heroes become Super Saiyan Gods, and when that isn't strong enough, they become Super Saiyan God Super Saiyans. And when that isn't strong enough, Goku becomes a Kaioken Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan... What? Now, Super redeems itself a little bit when it continues on to the Universe 6 tournament and the Tournament of Power, and it introduces several interesting characters with unique abilities that actually have to be strategized against and can't just be blown up with a massive ki blast. I actually really enjoyed the Universe 6 saga. The Super Dragon Balls are kind of dumb, but the new characters are awesome. The whole Monaka bit was hilarious and quintessential Dragon Ball humor. Botamo, Frost, Magetta, and Kaba are all fine characters. Champa is hilarious, and Hit is one of the best Dragon Ball characters of all time. Then the whole Komesan part was pretty cool too. It felt pretty GT-esque, but anyway, I'm starting to get a little distracted. The thing that I loved about the Tournament of Power was that leading up to it, they really emphasized how less powerful characters could be a huge asset through strategy. I was really hoping the tournament would be mostly focused on that. Instead, they throw most of that out the window almost immediately, and then the climax was Goku having another transformation in order to win. Now, to be fair, I do think Ultra Instinct is a good, unique transformation. Ultra Instinct just makes sense for Goku. I'm not upset with the transformation. I love the transformation. I'm just disappointed in the context of the transformation. Goku powers up to win a fight at the end of the saga and end the saga. GT doesn't really have any huge issues with power creep. I think Golden Uzaru and Super Saiyan 4 are the only new transformations really, and they're both pretty unique and interesting while harkening back to Dragon Ball's roots, and I think they're more interesting additions to the Saiyan lore. Plus, it helps that they aren't immediately involved with a god of destruction or the literal king of everything that can erase universes with a wink. So that brings me to my next point, power-ups. I like Super Saiyan God. I really like the idea that the next stage is slimmer and more agile. I like the idea that godly ki is different. However, I don't think Super Saiyan Blue or Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan should have been a separate stage. Super Saiyan God should have been blue from the first place so that we didn't feel like Goku was getting a major power-up every 2 seasons. I would totally be cool with this frequency of power-ups if they were more unique, but honestly, it just doesn't seem that much different from having another level on top of another level on top of Super Saiyan. Gold Frieza is just kind of dumb in my opinion. It looks super cool. The transformation is awesome. All the kind of angelic tones to it is really cool. But the transformation itself is just kind of dumb. And that's all I'm going to say about that because that's kind of just an opinion. As for GT, I think Golden Uzaru is pretty cool. It's kind of going full circle. The idea that a Saiyan who transforms into the Great Ape can then harness the power of the legendary Super Saiyan, I think that's pretty awesome. Super Saiyan 4, I for one think it looks awesome. The idea of gaining conscious control over the Great Ape form to become something more ingrained in the Saiyan roots is pretty neat. Just kind of the general look of it, having kind of the Great Ape tones to it, you know, the fur and the long hair and being more primal. It seems to be more respectful to kind of the Saiyan lore and background. Now, I get that that's 2 transformations, one in each season, but they happen so close to each other and they're so closely related and so incredibly different from previous iterations that I'm a little more cool with it. Now, I recognize that that might be a bit unfair, but I think that's just because this section is almost exclusively opinion-based. Anyway, now I want to talk about what each series does to our characters. So first, let's start with Goku. Super loves Goku. Goku gets all the power-ups. Goku's always the best. And even though they made him incredibly stupid and irresponsible, everything he always does works out. And as far as I remember, Beerus is the only one to truly best him. The thing that makes me mad, though, is how stupid Goku is in Super. By the end of Z, Goku obviously isn't super smart, but he is shown to be very calm, collected, and calculating. He has a brilliant fighting instinct and wouldn't do anything to put his friends and family in danger. In Super, he's so stupid that he asks for a tournament between every universe and ends up getting universes erased. But it's okay. They were going to erase the universes anyway. Now Goku's giving them a chance to fight for their existence. Why? Because it's Goku, that's why. In GT, Goku's reverted back to his child form, but he retains what he's learned over the years. The nature of their adventures has him acting like a kid again and having fun. But when things hit the fan, he gets serious and doesn't regress back into his childlike ways of behaving. He takes care of business. Now let's talk about Vegeta. As for Vegeta, I simultaneously love and hate what they've done with Vegeta. They've shown us he can keep up with Goku, and he's always almost as strong. Keyword, almost. He never gets the victory. In Resurrection F, he got the victory, and they were just like, hey, just kidding, we're going to rewind time so that Goku can win. But at least his character is tonally consistent with the direction of DBZ. You can tell he actually really cares for Bulma and Trunks, even through his tough exterior. I'd say GT is largely the same. Vegeta is mostly ignored until the Baby Saga, when we don't even really get to see Vegeta's personality. It isn't until Omega Shenron that we really get to see his character shine. Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta was a cool way to allow both Goku and Vegeta to get the win, as well as showcase Vegeta's growth. The fact that he was even willing to do that is pretty spectacular. He also has one line during his fight with Super 17 that really demonstrates his character growth. He says, Saiyan blood courses through my veins, but Earth is my home. And I think that just really shows how much he's grown. That said, both series kind of make a joke out of him a little bit. In GT with his pink shirt and his mustache, and then in Super with how afraid of Beerus and Whis and Bulma he is. Now let's talk Gohan. As much as I hate to say it, I think both series do the right thing with Gohan. Gohan's my favorite character. I really want him to be awesome, but in reality, it's more realistic that he just wants to have a normal life. Super treated this right. Him being out of training and reluctantly helping with Beerus and Frieza makes sense. Then they gave him a major power boost, and he's gotten to do some cool stuff during the Tournament of Power. GT has also done it right, as much as I hate to say it. In GT, he's basically living a normal life and has become super weak, and that's probably the way it should be. This does kind of go back to continuity, though. In Z, Gohan gives up his ability to go Super Saiyan in exchange for having his potential unlocked by the Kais and becoming Ultimate Gohan. Super completely ignores this and has him go Super Saiyan, while GT does respect the continuity. As for the secondary/minor characters, Super has given them a lot of weird, nonsensical power boosts so that they could participate in the Tournament of Power. Apparently, androids 17 and 18 are like Super Saiyan God levels of power, despite being hurt by bullets episode prior. Krillin held his own against Goku with his strategy, because apparently Goku is a tactical idiot now. Roshi is somehow powerful enough to fight in the Tournament of Power, and even Piccolo is decent enough. Tien got screwed, though. If you want to know how much Tien got screwed, follow this link, because this guy explains it way better than I ever could. Anyway, GT does equally poorly with the minor characters. Literally none of them matter until Bulma helps Vegeta build the machine during the Baby Saga. As for new characters, Super definitely gets the edge on this one. Beerus, Whis, Monaka, Champa, Hit, Zamasu, Xenosama, Toppo, Jiren, and like all the characters introduced during the Tournament of Power are pretty great. I love all the new characters that have been introduced. Well, almost all of them. GT doesn't really introduce any new characters of importance other than villains, but I will consider Pan a new character since she was just a baby in Z. I really like what they did with her character in GT, and I also like Giru. But Super definitely wins this one. Now let's talk villains. I'm definitely giving the edge to GT on this front. Super's new villains consist of Beerus, who I think is a great character, Frieza again, which is just boring, Zamasu, who's alright, that was a pretty good arc, and then there was an arc or two, I suppose, without a real villain necessarily, but just characters that had conflicting motives, which I'm actually a huge fan of. This is why I really love Hit and Jiren. They're not really bad guys, but they still provide obstacles for the heroes to overcome. GT introduces Dr. Mew, who is pretty good, Baby, who is my all-time favorite Dragon Ball villain, Super 17, who I kind of thought was dumb, and the Shadow Dragons. I love the idea of the Shadow Dragons. The Shadow Dragons bring the series, again, full circle, and lead to our heroes fighting off 8 very unique villains that culminate in one ultimate battle against Omega Shenron. This just ties in so well with the previous Dragon Ball lore. So now let's look at a little bit more of the technical aspects of the show. So let's start with animation. I think Super's animation is certainly much cleaner, but I'm personally a fan of the cell animation. I think the samey animation with too many bright colors and reflections are part of what makes the show feel really fake and generic to me. Now, when Super's animation is good, it's amazing, especially during some big fights in the Tournament of Power. But I think there's too many instances of them being really lazy with it and it being very bad or mediocre. GT's animation is much more consistent and impactful, plus the art style is more fluid and unique. I love the weight of the characters' movements and the way the environment moves around them. My other primary gripe with Super is that the flow is really bad for the first half. The segues from one arc to the next are practically non-existent, and the overall story doesn't mesh very well because it lacks an overarching theme or any sense of tonal consistency. With the exception of the Super 17 saga, I'd say GT feels pretty cohesive as a series, but it certainly has the advantage of being much shorter. The last thing I want to compare is how each series respects the franchise. While GT takes it in a new and unique direction while showing great respect for that which came before it, Super feels like more of the same sprinkled in with constant fan service. You can respect the past without blatantly trying to get nostalgia props, and I don't feel like they hit that mark very well. Ultimately, I think that's why I like GT so much better than Super. It recaptures the heart of Dragon Ball and the heart of Dragon Ball Z. Everything the series has been up until this point, GT knows, respects, and plays to that. Super kind of feels like a money grab, and not really a continuation of the same series. And that's weird because Toriyama is actually writing Super. GT gave us fun and exciting new adventures in the same spirit as its predecessors, and Super is more a celebration of those characters by trying to shoehorn everything in as if the writers don't understand why we like the franchise. We like the show because of the characters. The writers understand that. That's why they're trying to focus so much on people's favorite characters. The problem is, they don't understand why we like the characters. There are tons of other shows with characters that have cool powers and abilities. If that were the only reason we like Dragon Ball, we'd be watching those other shows. We like the characters because we've seen them grow through their adventures, and we've grown with them. You can't just coast on that and throw the characters into whatever you want and expect us to like it just because we already like the characters. You have to send the characters on new, unique, and creative adventures that allow them to struggle and grow. The plot in Super has just served as background for the characters to go from fight to fight. In Dragon Ball, they actually explored the world. In DBZ, they did this too, besides the Cell Saga. GT took that exploration to a whole new level, giving our characters so much opportunity for growth. GT is better than Super because it gives us the opportunity to grow with the characters once again, to really get to know them, not just watch them fight one guy after the next. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash and key blast those like and subscribe buttons, and more importantly, comment and let me know what you think. This is a pretty new channel, and I'm still trying to figure out what kind of content people like. So if you want to see more Dragon Ball stuff, let me know. If you want to see more unpopular opinions, or maybe some theories, let me know. Until next time, rock that dragon.